Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the Red Axanthic ball python. And the Red Axanthic is different than the other lines of Axanthics in ball pythons in that it's actually a codominant mutation instead of a recessive mutation. Meaning with one copy of the gene you can actually see an effect when you mix it in with other combos or as a standalone morph. Well, though with just one copy of the gene you can't really tell it's an Axanthic until you actually have two copies. Then you get the regular Axanthic appearance. Essentially Axanthic strips out all the colors and you're left with just black and white and grays. And I would say the Red Axanthic is really impressive when you have two copies of the gene and you start mixing it with other genes. It's really impressive. Probably one of the more impressive Axanthics in ball pythons. So today what I want to show you is I want to show you kind of the potential of having two copies of the gene, the Red Axanthic. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on morphmarket.com and I want to show you this snake right here. This is a Red Axanthic, two copies of the gene, and you can definitely tell it looks like an Axanthic. We pretty much stripped away all the colors and you're just left with the black and the white and the gray. As a matter of fact, this is an adult, so you can see that pretty much how it matures into an adult. It really keeps the brightness and the contrast, which is pretty cool. And I was kind of going back and forth trying to decide if I wanted to show you, the two copies of the gene, the Red Axanthic versus the Het Red Axanthic, and I kind of cut it off at the two copies because otherwise this video would be really long. There's a whole bunch of really awesome combos with the two copies of the Red Axanthic mixed in with other combos, and that's kind of what I want to focus on in this video. So what I want to start with is I want to start with a pastel, and the pastel is pretty much the bread and butter of the ball python industry. It brings out a lot of yellow in the snake, and it also kind of reduces the pattern a lot of times. A lot of times it keeps kind of the alien head patterns of a normal, but I'd say in most cases the pastel actually reduces the pattern. And this is what happens when you mix pastel with Red Axanthic. And take a look at this. You can almost tell on this one that it is completely different than all the other Axanthics. You almost see a little bit of yellow coming in, which you really don't see in any other visual Axanthics. Usually the pastel kind of really brings out a lot more white and cleans it up, and this is kind of an unusual characteristic for a ball python Axanthic to actually bring out this amount of yellow. But it's also kind of interesting that you get these patterns on the sides that are outlined in black, and it kind of lightens the whole background, gives it a really pretty interesting appearance like I've never really seen before. So here is a super pastel. So pastel is a codominant mutation. You actually breed two pastels together. 25% of the time you get a super pastel. This has two copies of the pastel gene and it really brings out a lot more of the yellow. It also kind of brings out kind of the whitish background as far as, kind of the background in super pastels is usually really light, and it really brings out a lot more fading on top of the head. And this is what happens when you mix super pastel with Red Axanthic. Take a look at this. This is a really awesome combo. Pretty unexpected. If someone handed me this snake, I would have a hard time trying to figure out what is in here. And you can definitely tell that in this case, it really didn't bring out a lot of the yellow. Instead, it really kind of jumbled up the pattern, and it almost looks like someone spilled some paint on the top of the snake, and it has these little drips down the side, which is a really interesting characteristic of the super pastel Red Axanthic. So here is a lesser ball python. I actually have quite a few lessers in my collection. I actually have some females that I've been breeding. Lesser is in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. You breed two lessers together. 25% of the time you get an all-white snake with blue eyes. And this is what happens when you mix lesser with Red Axanthic. Take a look at this. And this is kind of interesting. It's almost bringing out a little bit of yellow on the sides. Almost looks like a yellowish green. And you can definitely tell that the pattern is really scrambled up in a lot of these Red Axanthic combos. Seems like when you mix it in with other genes, it seems like a lot of times you're really getting a scrambled up pattern. And this one's actually possible het pied, and kind of one of the markers of a het pied is kind of this little ringer, the kind of the white coming up on the tail. I'm thinking that's probably from the het pied influence, and usually the het pied you really can't see much of an influence at all. So I would think if it wasn't het pied, you probably wouldn't see any color or or pattern change on the snake. You might see a reduction or a loss in the ringer. Sometimes it's kind of interesting with these ringers. Sometimes you don't have head pies, especially like with champagnes. Champagnes, you see a lot of ringers even without the het pied influence, which is pretty interesting. Here's another one, the Mahogany. The Mahogany is a dark morph. It's probably one of the greatest combos as a dark morph. When it mixes with other genes, you can make some really impressive combos. And this is what happens when you mix Mahogany with Red Axanthic. Take a look at this. This looks like no other ball python I've ever seen before. And take a look at this line right down the back. It almost looks like a little scribble mark right down the top. And just take a look at the patterns on the sides. That is really well. You can definitely tell the Mahogany really brings in a lot of dark into the Red Axanthic. Usually the Red Axanthic kind of has a lighter background and it's a little bit silver, and it seems like the Mahogany, when you start mixing it with other morphs and other combos, you get a lot of the black coming in. Pretty awesome. Here is the Albino, and when it comes to Albino, I'd say the Albino is extremely visually dominant, and in this case it's even more visually dominant than the Red Axanthic. And take a look at this. This is what happens when you mix Albino with Red Axanthic. You pretty much get kind of a faded out Albino. You really can't tell. It's kind of interesting because the Red Axanthic is really visually dominant by itself, and you kind of mix it with the Albino, and they're kind of fighting for dominance as far as the visual appearance, and in this case the Albino won out. And I'd say that's kind of the limitation of the Albino. A lot of times when you mix Albino with other genes, a lot of times it'll completely mask a lot of other genes, and sometimes you can just see like you get a lot of the Albino colors, and sometimes you'll just get like a pattern change in the Albino. And the Albino has red eyes, which is characteristic of the Albino. Kind of an interesting combo. Here's one. This is actually the Yellow-Bellied Pastel, and when it comes to really yellow snakes, bright yellow, I think if you actually mix the pastel and the yellow belly and the fire and the orange dream, all those make a really intense, really bright and clean snake. In this case, we just have yellow belly and pastel, and it makes for a really interesting looking, really bright and contrasty snake, bright yellow. And this is what happens when you take the Yellow-Bellied Pastel and you mix in the Red Axanthic. Take a look at this snake. This thing is crazy looking, and it's kind of interesting. It almost has kind of a yellowish green color to it, and just take a look at how busy the pattern is. Like every little spot on the snake has some crazy pattern to it, and the sides and the bottom and the top, even the top, it's not really a line. You know, some morphs actually have like a characteristic line right down the top, and this one is just kind of like a little dotted line right down the top. Has some crazy pattern on the side. Pretty awesome combo. Here is the genetic stripe. The genetic stripe is pretty visually dominant. This is also a recessive mutation. Well, this is actually recessive, and then the Red Axanthic is actually co-dominant. So essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to make a snake with 2 copies of the genetic stripe, 2 copies of the Red Axanthic. Pretty tough to hit. And this is what happens if you actually hit all 4 genes. This is a Red Axanthic genetic stripe, and take a look at this snake. That is totally different than all the other Red Axanthics. I would expect, you know, most of them have this really crazy pattern, and in this case you're getting a completely solid patternless snake with a little bit of white coming up the belly. That is really awesome, and it's kind of interesting. I really like the morphs where you can actually mix it with different genes and get really dramatic effects that are completely different than when mixing with other genes. It really gives you a lot of potential when you're kind of working these genes into some of your projects. You have a lot of variability as far as the visual appearance. So this is a banana. As a matter of fact, this is a banana pastel because I actually found a banana pastel Red Axanthic. I wanted to strip away the Red Axanthic and just kind of show you what the pastel banana looks like. And I'd say the pastel banana looks almost exactly like a banana. And I've actually produced some of these myself, and I can't tell that there's actually pastel because the banana is so visually dominant, it kind of masks the pastel. And here's what happens if you take a banana pastel and mix it with Red Axanthic. Take a look at this snake. And this one, you can definitely tell tell there's a little bit of banana in there. And I was actually kind of surprised because usually when you mix banana with anything else, you get a really visually dominant banana look to the ball python. In this case, it almost completely strips all the banana out. You can almost tell by the head it has a little banana in there. But you know, if someone had me this snake, I'd probably be hard pressed to say that there is banana in the snake. It's kind of interesting that it actually is more visually dominant than the banana. That is pretty unusual. So here's another one. This is actually the best of both worlds. This is actually the banana on top of the mahogany. And if you take a look at this, the banana is so visually dominant in this case that it actually overwhelms the mahogany is a dark morph. And this is what happens when you mix banana, mahogany, and red axanthic. Take a look at that snake. That is crazy. I just love it. I just love the patterns on these. Sometimes you get a really crazy pattern. It's almost unexpected, and sometimes you get a completely patternless snake. Pretty awesome for red axanthic. So here's another one. This is actually a super coral glow, pretty much the same thing as the super banana. And this is actually, if you actually take two of them together, breed them together, 25% of the time you'll get a super banana. This is what happens if you take the super coral glow and you mix it with the red axanthic. And take a look at this. This is kind of unexpected as well. This is actually, you can definitely see the banana in there, but the red axanthic completely fades it out. It's almost like they're battling for visual dominance. You can definitely see the influence of both the super coral glow and the red axanthic. So here is the spot nose. The spot nose works really well with a clown and some of the other combos. As a matter of fact, the spot nose is a little bit difficult to actually tell the difference between a spot nose and a normal. And kind of the thing that gives it away is the pattern right on the head for the spot nose. So if you're wondering, if you actually take a spot nose, breed it to something else, half the offspring are spot nose, and you're trying to figure out which ones are which, you can always look at the head. That is a giveaway that you have spot nose in the mix. And this is what happens when you mix spot nose with red axanthic. Take a look at this combo. This is really awesome. As a matter of fact, it kind of tones down the axanthic looks, brings in a little more color into the snake, which is kind of unexpected. And you can definitely tell the spot nose is in there if you take a look at the pattern on the head. This is the red axanthic spot nose. So here is a bamboo. As a matter of fact, this snake right here, this is Bobby that I usually have on my shoulders. I actually bought him here on Morphmarket. This is what happens when you mix bamboo, which is a visually dominant morph, with the red axanthic. Take a look at this, and it's almost, you know, I would say bamboo is kind of tough because a lot of things you mix in with bamboo, the bamboo is really visually dominant when it comes to a lot of combos, and you can definitely tell in this case, it kind of brings out more of the grayish kind of a color. And bamboo is kind of tricky because there's a lot of different lines of bamboo. Some of them almost look axanthic to start with, and some of them actually have reduced patterns. Bamboos can be really variable. So I'd say unless you actually have a whole clutch of bamboos and bamboo red axanthics, it'd be pretty tough to actually pick out the bamboo red axanthics. So here is a pied. Pied's a recessive mutation. Pied is one of the morphs that kick-started the ball python industry right from the beginning. It essentially what it does is it puts these patches of white all through the snake. Sometimes it's a high amount of white and sometimes it's a low amount of white. This is what happens when you mix pied with red axanthic. Take a look at this. It almost acts like a spider pied. In a spider pied, it actually takes all the color and it pushes it right to the head. And I've seen quite a few pieds that have red axanthic in there, and it seems like in every case you get a really high white pied, or it pushes all the color to the head, which is pretty interesting. Here is a blackhead yellow-belly. It's actually two genes. The blackhead is a dark morph, and the yellow-belly is really a difficult morph by itself. It looks almost like a normal ball python, but when you mix it with a lot of combos, it really brings out a lot of the yellow and makes some really awesome combos. This is what happens when you mix the blackhead yellow-belly with the red axanthic. Take a look at this snake. This is really awesome. I just love the stripe coming right down the top. It almost looks like a jet black snake snake I'm thinking that mostly is from the Blackhead and the Yellow-Belly. I've actually seen the Blackhead and the Red Axanthic, and if you actually strip out the Yellow-Belly, it doesn't have the streaking on the side. I love the streaking that the Yellow-Belly gives this combo. Really awesome. So here's the last one I want to show you. This is the Leopard, and I'm gonna get Leopard at some point. Leopard, I'd say, is pretty much the king of combos when it comes to codominant morphs. You mix Leopard with anything, and essentially what it does is it mixes up and jumbles up the pattern, and in most cases it actually keeps the original color of the morphs. So you're actually jumbling up the pattern, but you're not really changing the color of the snake. So if you can actually take almost any snake and add Leopard, and you get almost the same snake, but you get a jumbled up pattern, which is the power of the Leopard. And here's what happens when you take a Red Axanthic and you mix in Leopard. Take a look at this snake. This is really awesome, and it's really interesting. On some of these you get some really unusual effects, and this one it's kind of small and kind of hard to see on this white paper here, but you can definitely see right on the belly there's some light color right along the belly, and then right above that it has this black stripe, which is really awesome. I love this stripe here, and then you get this scrambled up pattern right on the sides, and then right on the head, on the neck, you get this little stripe. It's really interesting how the snake changes from the top all the way down to the belly. All right, so it is time for the question of the day, and Juancho Rodrigo Reyes asks, how can you tell the difference between a male maker and a female maker? And that is a very good question. Essentially, the male maker and the female maker anomaly is only associated with the coral glow / banana. A lot of people think the coral glow and the banana are the same gene, and it's kind of a really weird anomaly. As a matter of fact, I bought a coral glow. One of my very first snakes, I actually bought a coral glow, and I didn't know if it was a male maker or a female maker. And it was a couple years until I actually started breeding that snake, and I thought, all right, I'm not even gonna ask the person I bought it from, because you really can't tell what it is until you breed it out, or if you ask what the breeding was to produce that snake. And when I bred that coral glow, it's come to find out, to my amazement, every single coral glow offspring that I produced was a male. And it's kind of weird because the non-coral glow offspring are pretty much a 50-50 between males and females. But if you actually take a male maker, breed it to something else, all the coral glows that it produces are all males if it's a male maker, and if it's a female maker, all the offspring that are coral glows will be females. And really there's only one way to do it, is to breed it and prove it out, or if you know the breeding and how that snake was actually produced. So it's kind of weird if you actually have a female coral glow and that produces a male coral glow, then that male coral glow offspring is actually a female maker, which is kind of weird. And it's kind of the opposite too. If you actually start with a male maker and you breed it to something else and you get all males, all the males, since they came from a male coral glow, they're all male makers. And you have to really know the original breeding, if they came from a male or a female, to figure out if it's a male maker or a female maker. Or you can just breed it and find out. And you know, it's kind of interesting to actually buy one and not even ask and just kind of be surprised. I say most of the time nowadays, most of them are actually male makers. It was kind of interesting. I think the very first coral glow was actually a female maker, and it was pretty frustrating because everyone had to wait the 3 years, 2 to 3 years for the females to actually mature, and then it seemed like the male makers just took off and everyone wanted a male to kind of crank them out really quick. And that kind of, you know, it's kind of interesting. The prices were really high at the beginning, and since they had male makers all producing males, I think that was really kind of one of the things that did it in and made the price crash really fast for the coral glow. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.